November 1st, 1396. A 6-year-old girl walks down the aisle of St. Paul's Cathedral in London, her tiny crown too heavy for her head. In minutes, she'll become Queen of England, married to a man 23 years older. But here's what most people don't know. This wasn't just another medieval marriage. This was a calculated political sacrifice that would end in tragedy, betrayal, and a forgotten legacy that reveals the brutal reality of how children were used as pawns in the deadly game of royal diplomacy. Today we're uncovering the heartbreaking story of Isabelle of Valois, Europe's youngest queen, whose life was destroyed by the very people meant to protect her. From a father driven mad by mental illness to a mother who treated her daughters like commodities in a marketplace, we'll explore how medieval politics turned innocent children into bargaining chips and why Isabelle's story serves as a stark reminder of the price paid for peace between warring nations. This isn't just history, it's a warning about what happens when political power matters more than human dignity and childhood innocence. To understand Isabelle's tragic fate, we must first meet her father, Charles VI of France, known throughout history as Charles the Mad. Picture this nightmare scenario. The King of France believes he's made of glass and will shatter into pieces if anyone dares to touch him. He runs through palace corridors screaming that invisible enemies are chasing him, trying to kill him. This wasn't occasional strange behavior. These terrifying episodes of complete madness had plagued him relentlessly since age 24, leaving the entire kingdom of France in absolute chaos and political turmoil. Isabelle was born into this living nightmare on November 9th, 1389, at the magnificent Louvre Palace in Paris. Her mother, Isabelle of Bavaria, was equally problematic and dangerous, an incredibly ambitious and ruthless woman who coldly saw her daughters as nothing more than valuable trading pieces in the complex European political game. While her husband gradually lost his mind to insanity, Isabelle systematically accumulated power and wealth, openly kept multiple lovers while completely neglecting her innocent children's emotional and physical needs. In 1396, when little Isabelle was just 6 years old, a golden diplomatic opportunity suddenly presented itself to the desperate French court. Richard II of England, after tragically losing his beloved first wife, Anne of Bohemia, desperately needed a new strategic marriage alliance to save his crumbling reign. Facing dangerous internal rebellions, complete financial ruin, and the constant terrifying threat of being violently overthrown by his enemies, the calculating French counselors immediately saw their perfect chance for profit. They coldly offered innocent little Isabelle, along with a massive dowry of £800,000 and a precious 28-year truce agreement. For France, completely bankrupted by the devastating 100 Years' War, this represented an absolutely irresistible opportunity to buy temporary peace through the heartless sacrifice of an innocent child. The brutal negotiations were conducted with the complete coldness of a purely commercial business transaction. French and English ambassadors discussed terms and conditions as if sweet little Isabelle were nothing more than valuable livestock being sold at a crowded market. Some English counselors weakly argued they should wait until she turned 12, the age traditionally considered barely suitable for consummating marriage. But Richard II was far too desperate and impatient. The elaborate ceremony at St. Paul's Cathedral was carefully designed to impress the entire watching world. Hundreds of expensive candles danced mysteriously against beautiful Gothic windows. Talented choirs sang hauntingly in Latin and French, and thousands of spectators watched in fascination as a terrified 6-year-old girl was solemnly declared Queen of England in a ceremony that should never have happened. But behind all the magnificent spectacle was simply a terrified, confused child. Little Isabelle could barely carry her heavy crown's crushing weight, frequently cried uncontrollably. The archbishop had to awkwardly kneel down to place the oversized ring on her tiny finger, while she looked around desperately searching for familiar faces that were no longer anywhere to be found in the crowd. To Richard's genuine credit, he treated her much more like a beloved daughter than a wife, thoughtfully providing French tutors and graciously allowing her to maintain her native customs and language. But this protective arrangement would prove to be tragically short-lived and ultimately meaningless. In September 1399, everything changed forever in the most devastating way possible. Richard II was brutally deposed by the ambitious Henry Bolingbroke and subsequently murdered in cold blood at Pontefract Castle. At just 10 years old, innocent Isabelle became a widow without ever truly being a real wife in any meaningful sense. Her precarious situation became even more dangerous and uncertain. The new king, Henry IV, initially kept her as a valuable political prisoner, cynically hoping to use her in future diplomatic negotiations with France. For 3 long, lonely years, Isabelle lived in comfortable but isolated captivity at Havering Castle, writing increasingly desperate letters to her French relatives begging for help. "I write to you in tears," she wrote heartbreakingly to her father, "for I am kept here like a prisoner, far from all I love, without any hope of return to my homeland." Finally, in 1401, after intense diplomatic negotiations, Isabelle returned to France as a changed person. But the innocent girl who had left Paris at 6 had been completely transformed by traumatic experiences into a prematurely aged young woman. In 1405, at 16, she was again cynically used as political currency when her calculating mother arranged her second marriage to Charles of Orleans, a young French poet and nobleman. This time, however, Isabelle miraculously found something that had been cruelly denied her in childhood, a marriage genuinely based on mutual affection and respect. In 1407, Charles was captured by the English at the devastating Battle of Agincourt and spent 25 long years as a prisoner in England. Isabelle, again a widow in practice, returned to familiar solitude and dependence. In 1409, Isabelle gave birth to her only daughter, Joan of Orleans, a child who would grow up never knowing her imprisoned father. Motherhood brought her some consolation and joy, but also the bitter irony of knowing her own daughter would probably face the same terrible fate, being used as a political instrument in arranged marriages. Isabelle of Valois died tragically on September 13, 1409, at just 19 years old from serious postpartum complications. Her entire life had been completely dominated by others' selfish political needs. Sacrificed at 6, widowed at 10, imprisoned at 12, married again at 16 for political convenience, and a practical widow at 18 when her husband was captured. Isabelle's tragic story forces us to confront deeply uncomfortable truths about how entire societies can normalize the heartless sacrifice of innocence for temporary political gain. Her life was a continuous sacrifice to the merciless gods of medieval politics, a terrible price paid for temporary peace between enemy nations that would soon be at war again. What do you think was the most tragic aspect of Isabelle's heartbreaking story? Was it her childhood marriage, her years of imprisonment, or the fact that even her second chance at love was stolen from her? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to explore more forgotten stories of history's most vulnerable victims, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell.